What is it, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Credit Lake. Today, I'll be reading Happy to Listen, a Sanderside fanfic. Alternate ending to Forced Liar, but uncertain and inadequate. Please, if you can, go ahead and do the do's. Click the links in the description to support the author because they deserve it. And if you haven't read the first book, Forced Liar, I'd recommend you do so, as this is an alternate ending to that. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button because we're so close to 1K over here. And if you like Sanderside's content or reading aloud of fanfiction, we do a lot of that on the channel, so you could stay caught up. Prologue. It's been a week since Deceit's attempt. Remus has been trying to help him his mental stability increase, and hasn't left Deceit's room once. The two are also boyfriends now, despite the confessions happening at a bad time. Today was the day that Remus had planned to take Deceit out of the room with him to go see the others. They needed to understand what has nearly happened due to their carelessness, and they needed to accept Deceit. He was no different than the others, after all, just aside doing his job and wanting the best for Thomas. But honestly, Remus was nervous about this. How would the others react? Would they hate on Deceit more? Would they despise him as well? He was sure Deceit knew about him not being okay about this. He told him he was okay, but Deceit, the king of lies. So if anyone would know he was lying, it was him. Remus turned around and looked at Deceit and what he was wearing. A blush quickly appeared on his cheeks. He was wearing a black and yellow long-sleeve jumper, dark gray jeans, and black trainers with small two-headed snakes on the sides. God, you look so innocent, Remus giggled as he held out a hand to pull Deceit up out of his bed. Deceit blushed bright red and took Remus's hand. Do I? Remus nodded and pulled Deceit up, smiling. Of course. You'd know if I was lying. Deceit blush grew and he giggled. Yeah, I guess I would. Remus pulled Deceit to the door happily. He was about to open the door when Deceit stopped him. He turned his head to look at Deceit. Is this a good idea? Can't we just stay in here together forever? Deceit asked quietly. I wish that were an option, Remus mumbled quietly before opening the door and beginning to lead Deceit down the hallway to the light sides. God, if only that were an actual option. But unfortunately, it wasn't. Chapter 1. Chattering could be heard from the living room of the lighter side of the Mind Palace as Deceit and Remus nervously approached. Deceit clung to Remus's hand, nervously shaking slightly as they grew closer. As much as he was trying to hide it, Remus was just as nervous. So many things could go wrong. What if Deceit tried to kill himself again because of how they react? How would they react to him standing up for Deceit? God, he was starting to become his own Virgil. He took a deep breath to calm his nerves as they made it to outside of their opposing sides living room. Remus turned his head and looked at Deceit. Wait here for a minute, he instructed as Deceit let go of his hand. Remus smiled at him and kissed his nose before entering the light-sized living room nonchalantly. The light-size looked at him in confusion. No crazy and dramatic entrance? What in the name of crofters? Rem was the first to speak up. You okay, Rem? This isn't like you. Indeed, Logan joined in. Not to mention your abrupt lack of communication for a week. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Something came up, Remus mumbled, leaning against the wall. You seem bothered by it, kiddo. Want to talk? Patton asked worryingly. Actually, yeah, that's why I'm here. Remus laughed nervously. The four light sides looked at him expectantly, and Remus stayed silent for a moment, thinking before saying more. Also, I brought someone with me. That was Deceit's cue. He picked his head from around the door and weakly smiled at the others awkwardly. The two other then, Virgil and Logan, glared at him before the two noticed them glaring, making them join in. Remus noticed the glares they were giving Deceit, but he tried to ignore them. So, you guys don't like Deceit? If you're trying to get us to like him, Remus, it ain't gonna happen, Roman said blankly, folding his arms. But no buts. He's the bad guy. He doesn't deserve us to accept him. Deceit's eyes filled with tears, but he tried to repress them. Unbeknownst to him, Virgil could sense Deceit's negativity because anxiety was in the mix and felt bad for him. Remus glared at his brother. No, he isn't, and he deserves all the acceptance you guys can give. Did you miss the part where he's the bad guy, kiddo? Patton asked, raising an eyebrow. Remus froze. He tried his best to contain himself. Why is he the bad guy? 'Cause he's a dark side? I'm a dark side as well. Yeah, but your other half is one of us, Patton pointed out. No, Roman's not my other half. We may have been one whole side before, but that was years ago, Remus sighed. He was beginning to lose control of himself. But still, Patton tried to speak again, but was interrupted. No fucking but stills. He fucking deserves your respect, Remus snapped. He shouldn't have said that. Their glares, all instantly directed towards Remus, Virgil and Logan's, slightly delayed. Roman stood up and marched over to Remus. And why the fuck do you care about such a disgrace of a side? Deceit's eyes filled with more tears, and he hid around the door again. His depression levels were rising again, as he took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. Remus thought for a moment, trying to decide between being honest and lying. Before he came up to a decision, he quickly blared out, Because he's my fucking boyfriend! The other sides all froze and fell silent. They hadn't expected that. Fuck. Remus had fucked up, hadn't he? He'd blown his chance to get them to accept Deceit. They were both going to be outcast again. Get out, Roman said coldly, looking away from Remus. But I said get out! Roman yelled at him, glaring daggers at his brother. Remus nodded quickly, and didn't think twice before dashing out the room and back to the darker side of the Mind Palace, Deceit following closely behind. Chapter 2. Remus, with Deceit following closely behind, ran into Deceit's room and slammed the door shut after Deceit got inside of the room. He ran over to his bed and flopped down face first on top of it, trying to repress tears. Deceit walked over and sat down beside him on the bed, placing a hand on his back. You okay, Remus? His tears had since been repressed. Remus raised his head to look at Deceit and nodded. Yeah, just pissed off. He half lied. It was true that he was pissed, but he was also feeling something else. A few feelings he couldn't recognize, but he knew they'd been felt by him before. Deceit bit his lip inside. Some part of him told him that Remus was lying, but other parts of him told him he wasn't. He couldn't recall ever being so conflicted like this. Okay, if you say so. Remus sat upright and he hugged Deceit, pulling the snake-like side close to him. Are you okay, though? Deceit was way more important than him. After all, whoa, where did that come from? Deceit sighed. Yes. Curled up and buried his face into Remus's arm. It's fair, he mumbled quietly, allowing his tears to continue trickling down his face once more. I know, Dee. I know. Remus sighed sympathetically, running a gentle and comforting hand through Deceit's hair. We'll get them to understand eventually, okay? We just gotta stay strong. Okay. Deceit mumbled and hugged Remus tightly as Remus wiped his tears away. This wasn't fair. None of this was fair. They shouldn't be treated like this. They didn't deserve this. Remus was there, though. He could help them both and make sure they were accepted, as he was certain he, too, was no longer wanted by the light sides. He had to make this better. That was his job. He had to do this. If he didn't, what would Deceit think? If he failed, Deceit would hate him. Remus?
Yeah, Deceit?
You could call me my name when it's just us two, you know. Since you know. You know it now from having read the letter I wrote. Remus froze as images of the state Deceit was in when he ran into the room flashed to his mind. He closed his eyes tightly as he shook his head, trying to ignore it.
Okay, Jan. I just never got the okay about that, and I didn't want to make you uncomfortable.
He laughed awkwardly. It's all right, Rem. Makes sense. Just don't let the others know my name. Deceit looked up at him.
I won't, if that's what you want. Plus, they don't deserve to get jealous of the best name here.
Remus smiled softly at Deceit and pecked his lips. Deceit blushed faintly at the human side of his face and smiled. My name isn't the best, surely, but thank you anyways. Remus rolled his eyes.
Of course it is! Janus is such a great name!
He grinned and giggled quietly. The entirety of Janus is great. Deceit's blush increased. Well, you have a better name than me. It was Remus's turn to blush. He shook his head and booped Deceit on the nose. Nope. Deceit derped and giggled quietly. Yep. Remus leaned backwards to lying down and pulled Deceit with him, cuddling him closely.
How about this? We've both got the best names,
he suggested happily.
Only Janus does, though.
Deceit snuggled into Remus and nodded. There was a feeling that something was wrong, like Remus was still lying to him, but he shrugged it off. After all, Remus wouldn't lie to him, right? Remus ran the hand through Deceit's hair again and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead.
I love you, Janus.
He wouldn't admit it verbally, but referring to Deceit as his name aloud felt strange. Suppose he'd have to get used to it, though. Deceit smiled widely. Love you too, Remus. He moved his head on top of Remus's chest and relaxed, closing his eyes happily. Within a few moments, he was snoring quietly. Remus smiled wider, yet softer upon noticing Deceit was asleep. When he was the last time Deceit had even slept. He was sure he hadn't slept the entire time he'd been there in his room with him. Remus was a light sleeper, and he could often hear Deceit's phone through the night and noticed the bags underneath Deceit's human eye. Remus sighed contentedly and watched Deceit for a moment. God, he was so cute. How someone like Deceit could love a monster like Remus, he'd never know. Wait, what? Remus leaned his head backwards and stared up at the roof of Deceit's queen bed, sighing again. It was one of those beds with the weird fabric hanging over them from the top of what looked like royalty would have. Remus could never remember what they were called. I need to make things better. For him. If I don't, he'll hate me and be ashamed of me, but how can I when I'm in the same position? Remus closed his eyes. My own brother hates me. Everyone hates me. Except for Janus. Remus bit his bottom lip forcefully. Now he understood how Deceit feels. With everyone hating him, it wasn't fun. I'll make things right. Don't worry. Janus, even at the cost of my own life. Remus took a deep breath and reopened his eyes, staring upwards before spacing out. The best form of sleep he'd gotten for a while. Chapter 3. They both woke up to a knock at the door. Remus was the first one to respond, however, and he blinked a couple times to regain total consciousness. He lifted his head up and sighed, carefully nudging Deceit as he thought he was still fast asleep. He was confused. Why was someone at the door? Didn't everyone hate them both? Deceit was still half asleep, but he at the same time had consciousness already with him. He grunted quietly in response and yawned, opening his eyes and turning his head to look at Remus. Is it just me, or was there a knock at the door? He asked sleepily, rubbing his eyes.
Yeah, there was a knock at the door.
Remus nodded and blushed faintly at Deceit's innocence.
I'll go get it. You stay here, Jan.
Deceit nodded and moved off of Remus weakly, curling up on the bed beside him and yawning again. Remus kissed Deceit's head softly and smiled at him before heavily heaving himself up off the bed. He walked over to the door and opened it, only to allow him to see who it was. It was Virgil.
What do you want?
Remus asked coldly, not opening the door any more. For all he knew, Virgil might attack him. Surely not, though. I mean, who comes at... Wait, what time is it? Judging by Virgil's appearance, he guessed it was either really early or really late. Virgil was wearing black and purple striped pants with a long-sleeved black top on, quite obviously pajamas. His makeup was no longer on his face, and his hair was a mess. I want to talk, Virgil mumbled anxiously, no surprise there, as he fiddled with his fingers nervously. What did he want to talk about? Was he going to just insult Remus and Deceit? But why at the same time? Whenever it was it so the others wouldn't know? But why wouldn't he have want the others to know in the first place? Was he going to hurt the two of them? Remus wouldn't let him. He himself might deserve the pain if he can't do something as simple as have himself and Deceit accepted, but he wouldn't give in to whatever this was that easily.
Go away before I break your neck, Emo,
he growled lowly, glaring. Virgil visibly shrunk away from Remus slightly, scared, and Remus almost felt bad for him. I'm sorry, I understand you being on edge, but really, I just want to talk.
Fuck off,
Remus growled more fiercely. Oh, come on, Remus, please. I even went through the effort of moving out of my sleeping prince's arms without waking him at 3 a.m. for this. Virgil sighed, his anxiety clearly spiking. So it's 3 a.m. Remus thought for a moment, remaining silent. He sighed and looked behind him at Deceit to ask him a question, but he was already back asleep. He smiled softly and sighed again as he looked back at Virgil, opening the door fully and leaning against the door frame.
You could come in, but try not to be loud. Dee Dee's sleeping,
Remus said, as he walked back over to the bed, Virgil following quietly after closing the door behind him. Remus sat down and pulled Deceit's head gently onto his lap. Deceit smiled automatically, yawning quietly, but remaining asleep. Remus blushed faintly as he ran a hand through his hair, smiling before looking up at Virgil with a slight glare.
Talk. How can I believe you?
Remus asked, cautiously raising an eyebrow. He didn't want to be getting involved in something that could go incredibly wrong if it wasn't what he was being told by the anxious trait. Virgil sighed. I don't know, but it's an option that's out there. I know I'm not lying to you, but it's up to you to believe me, Remus.
Okay.
Remus bit his bottom lip for a moment, thinking.
Remind me why you decided on this all of a sudden?
Remus kept his eyebrow raised at him. I've been thinking about what happened yesterday, and I can't stand Roman nagging about you guys to me when, you know. Virgil laughed quietly and awkwardly.
Yeah.
Remus sighed. He thought over his options momentarily, smiling slightly as he came to a decision.
Fine. I guess I'll agree.
For D. Plus, I can't keep saying no to that. Virgil blushed faintly. Yeah, he bit his bottom lip nervously. You sure you could do this, though? I mean, what if it all goes wrong and Roman ends up hating me? Don't fret, Emo.
He'd never hate you. Plus, if that ever happened, you know this precious bean here would beat him up.
Remus smirked. Virgil laughed quietly.
Yeah,
I guess you're right, Remus. I know exactly
how to make it happen as well, so you don't have to worry about it.
Remus shrugged, as if he did this often. Don't use the truth or dare or blackmail trick, though, Virgil said blankly, with some seriousness in his tone.
Aw, you're no fun, emo,
Remus groaned and stared upwards, tilting his head backwards. This is serious, Remus. No fucking this up, or I won't. Understand? Virgil glared at him, and he sighed, bringing his head back to normal.
Yes,
Remus nodded. Virgil smiled at him. Thanks. This means a lot to me. He looked at Remus's phone on the bedside table, which turned on as he got a notification to check his time. It's 4 in the morning now, Virgil said as he stood up. I suppose we should get some more sleep now, and both enjoy more cuddle time for a bit. He began to make his way over to the door. As he opened it and began stepping out, he heard Remus saying something to him.
Later, it's a lover boy.
Virgil rolled his eyes and waved his hand in acknowledgement as the door closed behind him. Later. Chapter 4. Remus's Point of View. Long story short, when Virgil left the room that morning, I never managed to get back to sleep, instead deciding to stay on my phone until Janus woke up. When he woke around 7:30, I looked down at him from my phone and smiled warmly.
Morning, Jan.
Morning, Rim. He sat up and rubbed his eyes sleepily, leaning against the headboard beside me. His voice made it evident that he was just awakened. What time is it? He asked sleepily.
About 7:30 in the morning,
I answered, putting my phone down beside me and hugging him gently.
You sleep well?
Yeah. I felt Janus's arms wrap around me, and I smiled slightly wider. Who was at the door last night? Remaining quiet, I thought about what to tell him. If I told him it was Virgil, he'd ask why he was there. If I said Roman, Janus would either not believe me or he'd panic that Roman hurt me. If I lied about it being Patton or Logan, he might not believe me, but he'd ask about why they were there. Wait, why was I thinking about this? He's deceit. He'd know if I was lying.
Someone?
I said, shrugging. He gave me a blank look. Who, though?
You don't need to know.
Janus sighed, giving up. Fine. I smiled and rolled my eyes.
So, any idea on what you want to do? We can't exactly do much now.
I laughed awkwardly, quietly. I could tell he was thinking for a moment before smiling. Can we go to your half of the imagination? Not gonna lie, I was taken aback by that. He wanted to go to my section of the imagination. Did he realize how dangerous that could get? Regardless, I nodded and smiled slightly wider. Sure. Sweet. God, he was so cute sometimes. Standing up from the bed, I lifted Janus up with me so I could carry him, so he could remain hugging me. He giggled quietly, and I couldn't help but blush as I carried him out of the room, carefully not to drop him as I opened the door. As he clung to me tightly, I headed back to my room where the door to the imagination was. Me and Roman both have one of these doors in our rooms that led us there. It's quicker than walking out there. I let Janus down, and we were both there as we opened the door for him dramatically with a bow. He smiled and bowed back at me with a laugh before walking in as I followed after him, making sure the door was closed behind us. Chapter 5. Remus's Point of View.
So, what do you want to do first, January?
I asked as we entered my section of the imagination. He didn't respond as he looked around in amazement and wonder. Dark green grass covered the ground we were now standing on. It was dead, yet beautiful at the same time. To our right was a forest with black trees and bright green leaves. A few bats were flying around in there, but other than that, it was pretty much dead. To our left was an open field of total chaos. Anything you could think of regarding me, it was there. As long as me and Janus didn't move past the invisible barrier, stopping them from leaving the field, then we should be all good. Ahead of us was a tall mountain with a winding path leading up it from where we currently were. At the top was a Nora castle with a bright green turrets, dark green vines, and occasional moss clinging to the sides, giving it an abandoned and eerie feeling. The fact that it was entirely darker here, the sun being doled out by storm clouds that never rain, helped add to the feeling. Off in the distance, beside the mountain, another mountain is visible with a castle on top. Its bright and glistening cream walls and bright red turrets, fresh and alive scenery surrounding pained me. Being forced to share this space with Roman is horrible.
January?
I tilted my head at him, chuckling quietly at his non-response as I poked his shoulder gently. Remus, this place is amazing, he laughed with a smile, looking up at the castle. Can we go up there?
Sure thing, Jan.
I smiled and tagged him before running off along the pathway.
Come on, Janus!
I laughed, hearing him scream "Hey, no fair!" before running after me. Within a couple of minutes, we'd already made it to the top. How? This is my imagination. I could have whatever happen, even if that's controlling how fast we could run. Sure, I could have just teleported us to the top, but where's the fun in that?
I win,
I laughed as he made it beside me. I'll race you to the throne room. Remus looked at me like I was insane for a moment. I don't know where that is. Remus! I'd grabbed his hand and was already dashing through the castle, ignoring the black skeleton servants greeting my presence and welcoming me inside from a small, "Hey, this is my boyfriend." When we got to the throne room, I quickly let go and jumped onto the black throne, leaning my legs over one arm of the chair. I clicked my fingers, and an identical chair, but in yellow, appeared beside mine.
Come on, sit.
I laughed, indicating towards his new throne. He nodded before sitting down on it, running his now ungloved hands along the various wooden designs. One of the skeletons approached us with a black cushion in hand, a dark crown sitting on top of it. Readjusting my posture, swinging my legs around and sitting normally, I bent down slightly as he placed it upon my head. With a click of my fingers, another came out and placed one on Janus's head.
Thank you both. You may now return to your duties. Chaos informed Dorcha that Prince Roman is once again our enemy. This time it's more severe, and he must be dealt with, I instructed, noticing Janus's glare. Chaos nodded, and left with Ulk as I turned towards Janus. Chaos having been the skeleton that gave me my crown, and Ulk being the one that gave Janus his. What? 4 things. 1. The fuck?
2. The fuck? 3. I like the crown. 4. What the fuck? 5. No hurting your brother. I laughed quietly and rolled my eyes, smiling.
Well, you're my boyfriend now, Dee, so you're the king as well. Also, I'll only hurt him if he hurts you again.
Reaching over to him, I pecked his cheek, and he smiled before raising a confused eyebrow. But how could I be a king if we aren't married? And I thought you were the Duke.
Well, outside of the imagination, I'm just a gook, but here I'm a prince, and,
I jumped off the throne and knelt down in front of Janus. I clicked my finger behind my back, and a proposal box appeared in my hand. JK was written on top, as he knew how I was playing and obviously began holding back a laugh.
Janus Deceit Sanders, will you do the honor of being my king and marry me?
I asked, opening the box to reveal a ring that may as well be a wedding ring. However, if me and Jan never do get married, it won't look like this. It would look much better. Janus ended up laughing quietly and rolled his eyes. Of course, my dark Duke. He held out his hand, and I blushed at the nickname, slipping the ring on and clicking the box away.
Well, now that that's settled,
I stood upright again and pulled Janus up by one hand, wrapping one arm around his waist and connecting our lips softly. Feeling his soft lips kiss back and his warm arms wrap around my neck, I smiled and closed my eyes happily. This was nice. It's unfortunate we weren't actually getting married. One day that'd be nice, though, to rule my kingdom of darkness with him and make it our kingdom.
Too bad we have to deal with the others first. After about a minute, we pulled away for air and chuckled in unison, whilst panting. I pressed my forehead to his, and looked into his warm eyes. I love you, Janus.
I love you too, Remus.
What do you want to do now? I asked, stepping back and taking his other hand in mine.
Can we explore? Janus asked, looking around the dark and regal throne room.
Of course, JD.
I laughed, causing him to laugh with me as we began to exit the throne room.
Explore the castle or the kingdom?
Kingdom, Janus responded as we approached by another servant. He bowed at us. King Remus, and...
His name's Janus. He's my adorable boyfriend.
I smirked, leaning my head against Janus's as he blushed bright red, only further proving my point. Thank you, sire. King Remus, Prince Janus, I have something to bring to your attention. Disk began.
Go on, Disk,
I encouraged, Janus growing confused at what I'm saying. I may have to discontinue serving you momentarily again, as my wife has once again fallen ill due to the curse.
Again?
Has the curse still not been discovered? I asked worriedly, sympathetically, filling my tone with voice. Disk shook his head solemnly. I fear it's growing more powerful, Your Highness. It might grow to affect more of the village. We already have numbers of cases growing constantly out of nowhere, he mumbled.
Hey.
I started quietly, placing a comforting hand upon his cold shoulder.
She'll be all right. They'll all be all right. I'll make sure the healers are all doing their part and trying their hardest to best this, all right?
Yes, Your Highness, Disk sighed, nodding.
Now go spend some time with your wife and be careful.
Disk nodded once more, flashing a smile at me before walking down the corridor. Remus, what's this curse? Janus asked with concern, looking at me. And you never told me there was a village. Oh, right.
It's nothing to worry about, January. Just some stupid curse set upon a village beyond the forest.
I shrugged, laughing awkwardly. Janus sighed and placed his hands on my shoulders, locking eyes with me. If I'm the other king of this kingdom, then I deserve to know, Remus.
You have a point,
I mumbled, taking a deep breath.
Mine and Roman's kingdoms had a war years back, and a wizard from his cursed the village to weaken us all. The wizard has since been killed, but no one, not even a Roman, knows how to remove the curse. So now we just have to deal with these random waves of sicknesses.
Janus seemed shocked for a moment, before quickly hugging me. Jesus Christ, Rem, that's horrible, he mumbled unsympathetically for the kingdom.
It really never was nice. I had to keep hope for them all, though, just like how I have hope for Janus. And how everything will be alright for him. I'm going to make sure everyone's alright.
Virgil's gonna help too, I guess. Wait, the fuck? The deal! Gotta talk to Roman soon!
Yeah, hey, why don't we start heading back? I'm sorry, we aren't exploring, but it could be dangerous being there with the sickness going about again.
I mean, I wasn't entirely lying. I think you could tell I was hiding something from him, but never verbally questioned it. Right, let's get going. Hopefully they'll be okay. Taking his hand, I nodded in agreement.
Yeah, now, come on. We exchanged smiles before dashing down the hallways to the exit.
Well, more so, I was running whilst dragging Janus alongside me. God, I'll have to bring him back here. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support the author, please click the links to the book and to the author in the description below. You can also find my Etsy shop, where I sell beaded things, and you should check that out. There's also other social medias, like Twitter, Instagram, and my TikTok that is totally popping off. And there is the channel Discord. We can talk to other ducks and drakes. Thank you for listening, and much like Remus trying his best to get Janus accepted, do your best.